All right, hey guys, this is the start of video number 2. Obviously, I'm not going to go into as much detail explaining like how these videos are working and how the project checkpoints are going to work in this unit because I did it in the last video, so we're just going to hop right in. Okay, so, and again, you should be taking notes as you go through these. We're talking about two different business models that people use, and we're getting to those specific people here in a second. We had vertical integration is one of them. So this is how people made money. Okay. Now, Andrew Carnegie with the steel industry, he made bukus of money off of this. We'll get to him later. But what vertical industry is, so like up and down, is you control the whole process of your finished product. Okay. So you own the supplies. Okay. You own the transportation. You own everything. Okay. What Andrew Carnegie did was this. Okay. He used vertical integration. He was a big steel guy, big steel tycoon. So guess what he bought? He bought iron mills. Okay. That's like, what you take to make steel. He bought the iron mills. Okay. So he had the products. Okay. He takes the iron to his steel plants or whatever, makes the steel. And then guess what else Carnegie bought? He bought the railroads. Okay. So he's controlling the distribution. Okay. Now think about this. Okay. Today, if you had a company, you have to, like, let's say you had a bakery. Okay. You had a bakery that delivers. Oh, no. We'll say a pizza place. You have a pizza place that delivers. Obviously, right? You have to pay the supplier. Some food supplier that's going to give you the supplies needed to make your pizza. Unless you plan on growing, homemade tomatoes and you're going to have a wheat field out back that you're going to make flour out of and all that stuff. And you're going to have pigs to kill out back for pepperoni. Actually, I have no idea what goes into pepperoni. But you guys get the point. If you owned a pizza joint, you would not have all your supplies on hand. You would depend on a food truck to bring in your supplies needed to make the pizza. Now, you do make the pizzas there, right? Like, that's your job. You or your workers, y'all make the pizzas, dough them up all nice. Okay? But let's say you don't have delivery drivers. You offer delivery, but you only offer it through DoorDash. Okay? That's a third party. In other words, you do not, excuse me. You do not employ those people. In other words, the DoorDash people, like, you have to pay them, right, to do the work. Okay? But you do it that way. And obviously, like, you're going to have to pay the supplier and you're going to have to pay the DoorDash dude. Okay? Now, let's say you did have a pizza place wherever you did everything from the ground up. Okay? What would happen to the price of your pizza? Would you have to worry about the cost of paying people to do some of that work for you? Or because you control everything with vertical integration from the start to the finished product, what would happen to the price? Would it go down? Could you charge cheaper amounts for your pizza because you control things and you could eliminate the competition? Or would your costs get more expensive? Okay. What do you guys think? Okay. And I totally forgot. I have a list of questions on pepperoni here. Aha, there we go. So, what is an example of vertical integration today? Think about that. So, I'm thinking maybe like a store where, like, they have cans of corn that are their brand and stuff like that. So, what's one that uses vertical integration today? Think about that. Okay. Moving on. And here's the thing. If you do not get vertical and horizontal integration right off the bat, that is okay. Some of this stuff we're not going back over in class because, we're just going to touch on it because y'all have already went through it here. Vertical and horizontal integration, we will go back 2 and 3 times on. Okay. So, an example of vertical integration at an extreme, I will tell you guys about this real quick. Kind of neat. Obviously, Henry Ford, big automobile, dude. He had this great idea of something he was going to do. Was he bought an area of land in Brazil, the size of Connecticut. Okay, size of Connecticut, and it was basically jungle. He was going to get the rubber out of. He set up a rubber plantation basically in Brazil, and his great idea was, hey, I'm building cars. I need tires to put on my cars, and I need rubber to make my tires. So if I have that rubber plant, or excuse me, that rubber plantation down in Brazil, then I don't have to buy rubber from people. I'm producing it on my own. Things will be cheaper. So this was vertical integration at an extreme. Again, it was an area that was the size of the state of Connecticut. Okay. And he called it Fordlandia. Well, Fordlandia was an epic failure. Okay. And I actually had to write a paper about it in college. I'm not going to bore you all with the details. Okay. But it was kind of a neat idea by Henry Ford, but it just, at the end, this was vertical integration at an extreme. It did not work out. Okay. Moving on. Horizontal integration. So this is going across. And this is a little less complex than vertical integration. The way I would envision horizontal integration is this. It's like Pac-Man, where the Miss Pac-Man is chasing like the Pac-Man ghost across the screen. It's when a company buys out all the other companies selling the same product. Okay? So back to our pizza place example earlier. That would be like if here in Cadiz there were 2 other pizza places besides your own. You went and bought out the other 2 places and made it your pizza place because it eliminates the competition. So you basically gave them money and said, here, I'd like to buy your business and take over. They gave it to you, and guess what? Once you are the only pizza place in town, you can charge whatever you want because you don't have to worry about that competition. And some of you smart alecks are being like, well, people will just go to Princeton or Hopkinsville. Well, just imagine people are just in Cadiz here, okay? So it's when people, again, buy out all the other companies to eliminate that competition, okay? So it was a response to that economic competition that some people were facing. We'll look at Rockefeller here in a second. Rockefeller, richest man in United States history, founded the Standard Oil Company. Basically, the reason why he got so rich, he bought out all the other companies. Okay? All the other oil companies in the United States. And whenever you are about the only person selling oil, guess what? Guess what happens to the price of oil that you can charge? It goes up. Okay? Because, again, that lack of economic competition, that monopoly that is going on, where you're the only person that's in the market and you're dominating it. Okay? So we'll get to that a little bit more. Let's see. What is an example of horizontal integration today where companies have bought out other people? I have an example on the next slide, but I want you guys to think about it for 1 second. Okay? But the example I came up with is very relatable to our childhood. This is horizontal integration right here. Disney basically buying out Pixar. Okay? Now, anytime Pixar has a cartoon come out, guess what? It's actually by Disney. Okay? But it's Disney Pixar. Okay? Pixar used to be like DreamWorks. It used to be its own separate film company. And Disney one day realized, like, hey, like, we like to make good cartoons and make millions of dollars selling these cartoons to kids. Pixar likes to do the same thing, and they're kind of a threat to us. So Disney's like, hey, we have all this money. Let's buy out Pixar. Okay? And that's what happened. So this is a prime example of horizontal integration right here, is Disney buying out Pixar and then becoming one. Okay. Next up, we are going to go through some important people. So here, all right, real quick. Again, a quick review. If you need to pause, look at this. So vertical integration is you're controlling everything in the chain of supply. Okay, from like the like first products, like the resources, whatever. So like with steel, that was iron. In our pizza example, that'd be the food, like the flour and the sauce, whatever. And you have your supplier, and then the distributor is like, like the transportation. Okay. Horizontal integration is where you buy everybody else out. Okay. So we will go through this in class. If you need to pause and look at it for a second. Okay. Important people, you do have to know Frederick Taylor and Taylorism. Okay. Basically what Taylorism was and why it was so significant in the Industrial Revolution, the industrialization of America, is because it was basically scientific management with industry. Okay? So this involved taking a lot of data, looking at a lot of the things that factories were doing wrong. And Frederick Taylor realized factories were doing a lot of stuff wrong. Okay? His biggest takeaway was this. He said he wanted to look to eliminate wasting time. So he recommended that the biggest thing was that companies needed to give specific instructions to their workers. Okay, like, okay, Billy is responsible for this. Joey, you'll be working on this part, whatever. Giving specific instructions to different people. Okay, now I want you guys to think, how would this be better time management? How do you think this would cut down on the amount of time wasted in a factory? Okay, the answer is this. Okay, the answer is that obviously, if you're given specific instructions for what everybody is doing, then you don't have a bunch of people standing around not knowing what to do. Okay, or on the flip side, you don't have everybody doing one task that might only require one or two people to do. Okay, so you have one or two people focused on something that's early in the process of building a product. Then you have people working at all the different stages down the line. Okay, all the different stages down the line. Okay, and so that cuts down the amount of time you waste. You don't have people standing around, and again, also, you don't have a bunch of people doing a task that may only require a couple. Okay, so this looking at data and having telling and emphasizing to factory owners, like, look, if you look at the data and really think about the way you're doing things, you could do it a lot better if you have this scientific management or this scientific approach to your industry or how you do things. Okay, so you think Taylorism, it's scientific management in industry. Okay, next up, Henry Ford. We all know Ford cars. I drive a Ford Fusion personally, and I want to get a Ford truck eventually. Probably have to wait till I'm off a teacher salary, but or at least a first year teacher salary. But oh well. Okay, here's the thing about Henry Ford, though. He did not create the automobile, and don't ask me who created it because I do not know. Because all these different accounts conflict on who the first dude that created it was. But he perfected it, so it was the most efficient car out there, and it was the Ford Model T. Okay. Now, also, he did not create the assembly line. He created the moving assembly line. So the idea that like a part goes on the assembly line and the conveyor belt carries it down. Okay, he created that moving assembly line. But he also took these ideas from Taylorism. So obviously, with the moving assembly line, everybody having a specific part on this moving assembly line, he was applying that scientific approach, looking to cut down on the amount of time wasted in his factories. Now, this led obviously to a widespread automobile purchase by American families because more cars are being created, and we all know the law of supply and demand. Okay, so because there was that large supply of cars and it was easier for them to be produced, it made it much more affordable for the average American family. Okay, now being able to get around in a car as opposed to like a horse and buggy. I want you guys to think about an industry that you think may have started a few years after America saw this surge in automobiles on the road. What do you think took off that there started to be a lot of? All right. Obviously, if Americans are able to travel farther and more families have access to cars, then an industry that's going to take off is going to be the tourism industry. And in about the early 1900s, you do start to see this. A lot of roadside motels pop up. The idea of people going on vacation was like unheard of before cars became a thing. Some people, they were born and they died, 80 years later. They never wandered more than 10 miles away from where they were born. Okay, that used to be how it was back in the day. Now people will have these cars, they can go places. And so this creates that demand for that industry of tourism. Before that, tourism isn't really a thing. Okay, but when every American family has a car, people are able to get around. Obviously, it becomes a much bigger deal. Okay, Andrew Carnegie. Okay, now again, he was the guy in the steel industry with vertical integration. Came from Scotland. He was raised in poverty in Pennsylvania, and he was a steel tycoon. Okay, now again, he used this model of vertical integration. Okay, because he bought these railroads and iron mills and he could lower the cost of his steel that was produced because he did not have as much cost from the capital expenses. Remember, the capital are like the things that you are needed to run your business or like the products you need. So that's your primary resources. So in this case, iron, your production costs, the machinery, all that stuff. And whenever you control where you're getting the primary resource from and you own the railroads, yeah, you obviously do not have as many expenses because you literally own it, right? Okay, so he used this model called vertical integration. He was controlling that chain of supply up and down. Okay, he had his stake, his ownership in all those different parts, and he was able to, to have a much cheaper price for his steel. Okay, because he used the model of vertical integration. Okay. Moving up, Cornelius Vanderbilt. Okay, remember railroads were, if you remember from the first video, railroads were the first major industry in America, and Cornelius Vanderbilt was known as the Commodore. And you're like, okay, isn't that like a Navy type dude? And yes. Spoiler alert: Vanderbilt University, the Commodores, named for Cornelius Vanderbilt because he gave the money for Vandy to start. Okay, but early on, he made his fortune on from boats, like shipping and all that stuff. But as industrialization becomes a much bigger deal, he invested in the railroads because he recognized that industrialization was starting to take off. Okay, so he's like, okay, all these businesses are going to need railroads to get things places. So he was one of the first ones to really put all his money, shove all his chips in on the railroads. Okay, and because he invested in railroads really before they even took off, at his death, he was worth more than $200 billion in today's money. Okay, but you hear the name Cornelius Vanderbilt, you think of two things. You think of Vanderbilt University that he's named after and that he gave the money to start up. But the thing you got to know for your AFA is that he was the main dude that invested in the railroads. Okay? You think Vanderbilt, railroads. It's got to be instant thought. Next guy, John D. Rockefeller. He is regarded as the richest man in United States history. $418 billion in his bank account when he died. Like the equivalent of today's money, $418 billion. And he founded the Standard Oil Company. And if you remember, well, never mind, I said it earlier in this video. I'm getting my videos mixed up. Horizontal integration is he bought out the other oil companies and he eliminated the competition. Now, a quick recall question. What happens in the economy if you own a company and you buy out all the other companies? What can you do? Like, why is that an advantage if you own a business to get rid of the competition? Okay, I'll look over those answers later. But Rockefeller, again, he made his money with the Standard Oil Company because he bought out all the other oil companies. Okay, and then whenever he did that and eliminated the competition, he could charge whatever he wanted. Okay, so you think John D. Rockefeller, you think oil, richest man in history, horizontal integration because he bought out all those other companies. That's how he made his fortune. Okay. And that is the end of today's video. The rest of this we can just skip over for now. We will get to in class. But again, this is something new we're trying out. So hopefully you guys liked it. If not, then let me know. But this lets people work at a different pace and let you guys have some personal work time. So anyway, we'll see what we might do about it going forward. Thank y'all.